Playtesting. What is it? What to do before a playtest, what to do during a playtest, and what to do after a playtest. We're going to talk about all that and more right now. Hey there, my name is Pam. I'm a board game designer and I talk about all things board game design on this channel. And today we're talking about playtesting. So first of all, what is playtesting? Well, playtesting is when you have other people play a prototype of a game that you've made and get feedback from them and test to see what works and what doesn't. You can also playtest your prototype by yourself to see how things work on your own as well. So you're playing a game, but you're also testing elements of a game. You're playing and testing, you're playtesting. There's also something called blind playtesting, and that's when designers are testing out more so how the rules are read and understood for a game. So when you're blind playtesting a game, you give your prototype to players with a set of rules and pretend like you're not even in the room. Some people will even not actually be in the room and just record the playtest and review the footage afterwards, or somehow FaceTime in or Skype in to watch separately so that they're really removed from the situation. But for right now, we're just going to be focusing on standard playtesting rather than blind playtesting. Now, you won't be playtesting a game just once, seeing what works, what doesn't, make some changes, and you're done. That's not really how it works. There's a playtesting cycle. So you playtest a game, you make changes, you playtest a game, you make changes. You keep doing that over and over and over until you have a really good quality game at the end of it. And those changes that you make between playtests are based off the feedback that you get from playtesters and your own observations. And before we get into it any further, I did want to talk about the golden rule of playtesting, which is playtest the number of games of other designers equal to or more than the number of playtesters required for your playtest. When I first started out, I definitely was not aware of this rule, and I was just so focused on my game, and I was just so stressed out about my game and anxious about other people playing it and critiquing it that I really only focused on playtesting my game when I went to my very first playtest convention. I eventually played other designers' games, but for I think the first 2 days I only played mine. And that really is not great etiquette in the design community, so make sure that you always are offering up your own feedback, playing other designers' games, and not just taking feedback for your own game. So if you have 4 playtesters for your game, try and play 4 different games from 4 other designers as well. This is obviously more doable at conventions when you have multiple days to playtest games. If it's just a one-night meetup, that probably won't happen, but just always be available and open to playtest other designers' games and not just your own. So where can you playtest? Look for local designer groups. I have found a few on meetup.com. You might also find some Facebook groups, or go to a local board game store and see if they have designer meetups. If you can't physically go to meetups, or maybe you live somewhere more rural and you're not close to these sorts of things, there are a lot of options for you online. There's a really great group called the Seattle Tabletop Game Designers. They have a Discord, and I believe they meet every week. So it doesn't matter where you are, you can meet up with them online and share your game and get feedback. To play your games online, you will most likely need to learn a program like Tabletop Simulator and create digital versions of your prototypes to playtest them online. You can also just have a physical prototype and have one camera showing the game and ideally another camera showing you, or just one showing the game and moving players' pieces around on the table. You can also even just talk about your game to other designers online. You can explain your game, maybe explain any difficulties that you're having or questions that you have about it. And designers are really great, and they probably even visualize it and have ideas just from talking about it. And of course, you always have your friends and family. They're fantastic to playtest with. I playtest with my friends and family all the time, but just make sure that you're also getting perspectives from other people, especially people who you don't know, who don't have a relationship with you, so you can get all types of feedback and perspectives. You can also try posting to local Facebook groups and neighborhood groups to see if anyone in your neighborhood would like to meet up to playtest some of your games. Hey, Editing Pam here. I realized I didn't talk about one of the best places that you can playtest, which are conventions. At most large gaming conventions, they will have areas where designers can playtest their games, such as Gen Con and Origins and large conventions like that. There are also conventions dedicated to playtesting, such as Metatopia, and I would suggest also looking up Protospiel and Unpub, which have playtesting events as well. Check any local gaming conventions near you to see if they also have playtesting areas, or even if they don't, feel free to bring your prototypes to gaming conventions, and I'm sure you'll find a ton of people interested in playing your games there. Conventions are a great place to playtest your game because you can play it, make changes, and play again over the course of a few days. Of course, always being mindful to playtest other designers' games as well. Now back to the video. Now, preparing for your playtest, you want to make sure that you practice explaining your game. Set up the game, pretend your playtesters are sitting there, and actually go through explaining how to play your game at least a couple times before the playtest. Most importantly, you want to have the overview and how to win the game at the start of your explanation. That's happened to me quite a few times where I'm playtesting a designer's game and I don't actually know how to win the game. Or they might share that information at the very end of explaining all of the rules. So just get comfortable explaining the game a few times before you actually playtest the game with other people. Get a notebook or something that you can take notes on, write the date, the title of the game that you're testing, and what recent changes you're testing this iteration. When I first started out, I actually would make questionnaires, and that's what I would have playtesters fill out at the end of a playtest. I would get their name, their feedback, their comments all written out. I don't do that anymore because I prefer to just have a discussion and then write down the notes. But it is a nice way to easily keep track of who has playtested your game, have their comments written out that you can refer to. So it really is up to you if you want to have a questionnaire as well to have your playtesters fill out after they've played your game. And if you do have a questionnaire, don't make it super long. Just have their name, what they would rate the game out of 5 or 10, what they liked about the game, what they didn't like about the game, and if they would play the game again. Any other comments, and that's about it. If you're hosting your playtest at your house, be sure to have snacks and drinks for your playtesters to show your appreciation for their time and for their feedback on your game. You don't need to pay them, but it's definitely good to feed them and have drinks. If you're playtesting at a designer meetup, you obviously don't have to do that. It's just if you're inviting people over to your home to playtest, it's definitely good to be a good host. Now, once your playtesters are there, and you're about to play the game, make sure you write down everyone's names, first and last. I always make sure I do this, and then I keep track of all of my playtesters' names in a document for each game, because if the game gets published, I want to make sure I have all my playtesters' names so I can include them in the rulebook as an acknowledgement. Even if the game doesn't get published, in the chance that it does, you want to make sure you keep track of everyone who has playtested your game so it's easy to thank them in the rulebook. Now, you want to make sure you take note of the start time, of what time the players start playing your game. If it's a blind playtest, you want to take note of how long it takes the players to read your rules and to set up the game. And then during the playtest, you want to make sure you take notes. I write down my notes in a notebook. After the playtest, I then type out those notes in my Google Doc for that game. You could also take notes in the Notes app on your phone or an iPad or a laptop so you can skip that transcribing step. But just make sure that you do take notes. So now you can either play the game with the other playtesters or you can just sit and watch. Ideally, you would just sit and watch so that you're not affecting the gameplay, you're not offering up strategy that playtesters might not know because they're not the designer of the game. At the same time though, it is good to sometimes play your playtest because you want to see for yourself how it feels. Are you having fun? Do you enjoy it? So I would say do a mix of being a playtester yourself and just watching. Now during the playtest, make sure you do not help players with strategy. If they have questions about the rules, absolutely you can answer those. Unless it's a blind playtest, then you want to refer them to the rule book and see if they can find the answer to their question. But really resist the urge to help people with their strategy of their game. You really want to see how people play it and how they figure it out on their own. And don't be afraid to make small changes or tweaks during the playtest. If you feel like the cost of something is way too high, you can quickly lower that cost. If you feel like players should be able to draw 3 cards instead of 2, you can make that change. But just be conscious of not making too many changes or any major changes during your playtest. It really is good to see what works, what doesn't, then make changes after the playtest and try it again. During the playtest, keep an eye on the playtesters and their body language. Are they leaning forward to play the game? Are they talking with each other about what's happening? Or are they looking around? Are they looking on their phones? Are they distracted? And pay particular attention to when they're most engaged during your game. And don't be afraid to end a playtest early if it's completely broken, meaning there's a major flaw in the gameplay where it doesn't even work, or if it's just dragging on and you can clearly tell your playtesters aren't having fun. Once the game is done, make sure you write down the time that the game ended so you can see how long it took your playtesters to play your game. And these are the 4 questions that I like to ask after my playtests. What did you like or enjoy about the game? What did you not like or what was frustrating for you? What was your favorite moment during the game and would you play again? Those are the questions that I ask. Other designers might ask very specific questions or different types of questions. It's up to you to find a system that works for you. But one of the main things to keep in mind is to let the playtesters lead the discussion. If they really want to talk about how they really didn't like the theme, it didn't work for them, but that's not one of your set questions, that's not one of the things that you really wanted to focus on, if that's important to the playtesters, it should be important to you. And one thing I'll also note is that some playtesters like to start to give feedback during the playtest when they're actually playing the game, and I like to just ask them to make a note of their thought and then we'll discuss it at the end. And one thing that can be a little uncomfortable to do, but I think is really important, is to lean into the silence. A lot of designers will pepper the playtesters with questions and not let any silence hang over the group at all. But I like to just sit back. If there's a moment of silence, it's okay. The playtesters are thinking, they're processing a lot of information. And I can guarantee you, if you just let that silence sit for a second, one or all of them will then have more questions, more comments coming at you. But if you then change the direction completely by asking a different question than what they're all thinking about, you might miss out on a lot of their insight. If any playtesters are really quiet during the feedback portion of the playtest, ask them a direct question like, well, what was your favorite part? What did you really like? To engage them in the conversation. And one of the most important things to remember is do not argue with your playtesters' feedback. Don't try to justify things or defend things. Just take it all in, write it all down, and deal with it afterwards. So yes, write everything down, including things you don't agree with. Once your playtest is done, I like to go for a walk to clear my head, or actually doing dishes is actually a nice thing to do. It's just a mindless sort of thing that you can sort of zone out and let your brain take a break and clear your head. After you've kind of settled, review your notes from the playtest. And I then like to add them to my Google Doc that I have for that game. So I will have a Google Doc for the rules and a Google Doc for my playtesting notes and thoughts. Next steps. Decide what changes you want to make based off the feedback you received. Even if you don't really like the idea of something, you can always try it and change it back. But you get to decide what changes you're going to make and what you're going to try. Update your rules, update your prototype, and test it again. So if you enjoyed this video or if it was helpful to you at all, I hope you like and subscribe. And if you have any questions or want to keep the discussion going, please leave them in the comments below. And now go check out my video about 5 mistakes new board game designers make, and I'll see you over there.